The Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an order dated 15th April 2020 stating that in exercise of the powers conferred under Section 10(2)(1) of the Disaster Management Act 2005, the lockdown measures stipulated in the Consolidated Guidelines of Ministry of Home Affairs MHA for containment of COVID-19 epidemic in the country will continue to remain in force up to 3rd May 2020 to contain the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Selected additional activities will be allowed, which will come into effect from 20th April 2020. These additional activities will be operationalized by states, union territories, district administrations. Before operating these relaxations, states, union territories, district administration shall ensure that all preparatory arrangements with regard to social distancing in offices, workplaces, factories and establishments, as also other sectoral requirements are in place. The consolidated revised guidelines incorporating these relaxations are enclosed with the order and will be explained in ISL. If any area is included in the category of a containment zone due to spread of COVID-19, all the activities allowed in that area will then be suspended, except for those activities as are specifically permitted under the guidelines of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. In exercise of the powers conferred under the Disaster Management Act 2005, the Chairperson, National Executive Committee has issued directions to all the ministries, departments of Government of India, state, union territory governments for the strict implementation of enclosed revised guidelines issued by Ministry of Health, Ministry of Home Affairs. Para 1. The Ministry of Home Affairs has issued consolidated revised guidelines on the measures to be taken and followed by ministries, departments of Government of India, state, union territories and state, union territories authorities via an Ministry of Home Affairs order dated 15th April 2020. With the extension of the lockdown period, the following activities will continue to remain prohibited across the country until 3rd of May 2020. Point 1. All domestic and international air travel of passengers except for specified purposes listed. Point 2. All passenger movement by trains except for specified purposes listed. Point 3. Buses. Point 4. Metro rail services. Point 5. Movement of individuals except for medical reasons or for activities permitted under these guidelines. Point 6. All educational, training, coaching institutions, etc. shall remain closed. Point 7. All industrial and commercial activities other than those specifically permitted under these guidelines. Point 8. Hospitality services other than those specifically permitted under these guidelines. Point 9. Taxis including auto rickshaws and cycle rickshaws and services of cab aggregators. Point 10. All cinema halls, malls, entertainment places, parks, sports complexes, swimming pools, and similar places will all remain closed. Point 11. All academic, political, religious, cultural, other gatherings. Point 12. All religious places, places of worship shall be closed for public. Religious congregations are strictly prohibited. Point 13. In case of funerals, congregation of more than 20 persons will not be permitted. Para 2. Operation of guidelines in hotspots, that is, areas of large COVID-19 outbreaks and containment zones. Point 1. Hotspots with significant spread of COVID-19 will be determined as per the guidelines issued by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Point 2. In these hotspots, as per the guidelines of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, containment zones will be demarcated by states, UTs, district administrations. Point 3. In these containment zones, no activities will be permitted. There should be no unchecked inward-outward movement of population from these zones except for maintaining essential services including medical emergencies, food, etc. The guidelines issued in this regard by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare will be strictly implemented by state UT government and the local district authorities. Para 3. Selected permitted activities allowed with effect from 20th April 2020. Point 1. Selected additional activities have been allowed which will come into effect from 20th April 2020. These exemptions will be operationalized by states, UTs and district administrations. Standard operating procedure SOPs for social distancing in offices, workplaces, etc. should be followed, and all preparatory arrangements with regard to SOP should be ensured by the states, UTs, district administration before allowing these selected additional activities. Point 2. The guidelines incorporating these selected permitted activities have been enumerated in para 5 to 20, which will be explained later. Para 4. Strict enforcement of the lockdown guidelines. Point 1. State UT government shall not dilute these guidelines issued under the Disaster Management Act 2005 and shall strictly enforce the same. Point 2. State UT governments may, however, impose stricter measure than these guidelines as per the requirement of the local areas. Para 5. All health services including Ayush such as hospitals, nursing homes, clinics and telemedicine facilities will remain functional. Dispensaries, chemists, medical laboratories and collection centers etc. will also function. Pharmaceuticals and labs and institutions carrying out COVID-19 related research will remain open. Veterinary hospitals, labs, dispensaries, etc. will remain open. Authorized private establishments which support the efforts for containment of COVID-19 and manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, medical oxygen, etc. will remain functional. Construction of medical health infrastructure, including manufacture of ambulances, will function. Movement, including by air, of all medical personnel, nurses, etc., is allowed. Para 6. Agricultural and related activities, farming operations by farmers and farm workers in field, mandis operated by the Agriculture Produce Market Committee APMC, or as notified by the state UT government, etc., will be allowed to function. Shops of agriculture machinery, seeds, etc. will remain functional. In fisheries, operations of the fishing industry, including feeding and maintenance, harvesting, packaging, cold chain, sale, feed plants, etc., will be functional. Operations of tea, coffee, and rubber plantations and their packaging, sale, etc., with maximum of 50% workers will be functional. Operation of animal husbandry, farms including livestock farming activity, collection, distribution and sale of milk, including transport, animal feed manufacturing, etc., will be functional. Para 7. Financial sector. Reserve Bank of India and Reserve Bank of India regulated financial markets and entities like NPCI, National Payments Corporation of India, etc., dealers for banking operations, payment system operators, etc., will remain functional. Bank branches, ATMs, ATM operation, and cash management agencies will remain functional. Bank branches will be allowed to work as per normal working hours, and disbursal of DBT cash transfers will continue. Bank branches and banking correspondents should maintain social distancing and staggering of account holders. SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and related services, insurance companies, etc., will remain open. Para 8. Social sector, operation of homes for children, disabled, mentally challenged senior citizens, women, widows, etc. will remain functional. Disbursement of pensions, for example, old age, freedom fighter, widow pensions, and pension and provident fund services provided by employees provident fund organization will remain functional. Operation of Anganwadis, distribution of food items once in 15 days at the homes of the beneficiaries, for example, children and women. Beneficiaries will not attend the Anganwadis. Para 9. Online teaching, distance learning should be encouraged. All educational, coaching, training institutions, etc. shall remain closed. Educational institutes should use online teaching methods. Doordarshan and other educational channels may be used for teaching purposes. Para 10. MNREGA Manrega Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act works will be allowed with strict implementation of social distancing and face mask. Priority will be given to central and state works in irrigation and water conservation sectors under Manrega. Para 11. Operations of public utilities like petrol, diesel, kerosene, LPG, CNG, PNG, etc. are allowed to remain functional. Transmission and distribution of power and electricity at central and state UT level is allowed. Postal services, operations of utilities in water, sanitation and waste management sectors at municipal, local body levels in states and UTs will remain functional. Operation of utilities providing telecommunications and internet services will remain functional. Para 12. Movement, loading, unloading of goods, cargo is allowed. This includes all transportation of goods and parcel trains, airports, and related facilities for transport for cargo. Operations of seaports for cargo transport, cross-land border transportation of essential goods including petroleum products and LPG, food products and medical supplies. On highways, shops for truck repairs and dhabas with social distancing will be allowed. Movement of all trucks with 2 drivers and 1 helper, subject to the driver carrying a valid driving license, will be allowed. Movement of staff for operations of railways, airports, ships, etc. is allowed on passes being issued by the local authority. Para 13. Supply of essential goods is allowed, including manufacturing and sale of essential goods. E-commerce companies will be allowed. Shops selling food and grocery vegetables, milk and milk products, meat, fish, etc. should be allowed to operate. They should ensure in strict social distancing without any restriction on their timing of opening and closure. District authorities may encourage and facilitate home delivery. Para 14. Commercial and private establishments will be allowed to operate as listed below. Print and electronic media, including broadcasting, DTH and cable services, are allowed to operate. IT and IT-enabled services with up to 50% strength. Data and call centers for government activities only. Government approved common service centers at Gram Panchayat level are allowed to operate. E-commerce companies but vehicles used by e-commerce operators will be allowed to ply with necessary permissions. Courier services are allowed to operate. Cold storage and warehousing services, including at seaports, railway stations, airports, container depots, and other links in the logistics chain, are allowed to operate. Private security services and facilities management services for maintenance and upkeep of office and residential complexes are allowed to operate. Hotels, lodges, and motels, which are accommodating tourists and persons stranded due to lockdown, medical and emergency staff, air and sea crew are allowed to operate. Establishments used earmarked for quarantine facilities are allowed to operate. Services provided by self-employed persons, for example, electrician, IT repairs, machine repairs, motor mechanics, carpenters, etc., are allowed. Para 15. The following industries and industrial establishments, both government and private, will be allowed to operate. Industries operating in rural areas, that is outside the limits of municipal corporations or municipalities, will be allowed. Manufacturing units of essential goods including drugs, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, etc. is allowed. Food processing industries in rural areas, that is outside the limits of municipal corporations and municipalities, are allowed. Production units which require continuous process and their supply chain are allowed. Manufacturing of IT hardware is allowed. Coal production, mines and mineral production, their transportation and other related activities are allowed. Manufacturing units of packaging materials are allowed. Jute industries are allowed to operate. Oil and gas exploration refinery are allowed to operate. Brick kilns in rural areas, that is outside the limits of municipal corporations and municipalities, are allowed to operate. Para 16. The following construction activities will be allowed to operate. Construction of roads, irrigation projects, buildings, and all kinds of industrial projects in rural areas, that is outside the limits of municipal corporation and municipalities, will be allowed. Construction of renewable energy projects will be allowed. Para 17. Movement of persons is allowed in the following cases. Private vehicles for emergency services, including medical and veterinary care, and for procuring essential commodities. In such cases, one passenger besides the private vehicle driver can be permitted in the back seat. In case of four-wheelers, however, in case of two-wheelers, only the driver of the vehicle is to be permitted. As per the instructions of the state UT local authority, personnel travelling to place of work and back are allowed. Para 18. Offices of the Government of India and its autonomous and subordinate offices will remain open as mentioned further. Defence, Central Armed Police Forces, Health and Family Welfare, Disaster Management and Early Warning Agencies, Food Corporation of India, National Informatics Center, Nehru Yuva Kendras, and Customs to function without any restriction. Other ministries and departments and their offices are to function with 100% attendance of Deputy Secretary and levels above that. Remaining officers and staff to attend up to 33% as per requirement. Para 19. Offices of the state, union territory governments and local governments will remain open as mentioned further. Police, home guards, fire and emergency services, disaster management, etc. will function without any restrictions. All other departments of state, UT governments to work with restricted staff. Group A and B officers may attend as required. Group C and levels below that may attend up to 33% of strength as per requirement to ensure social distancing. However, delivery of public services shall be ensured and necessary staff will be deployed for such purpose. District administration and treasury, including field offices of the Accountant General, will function with restricted staff, with social distancing ensured. Resident Commissioner of State UTs in New Delhi, only to the extent of coordinating COVID-19 related activities are allowed. Forest offices, staff workers required to operate and maintain zoo, nurseries, wildlife, firefighting in forests, watering plantations, patrolling and their necessary transport movement are allowed to function. Para 20. Persons to remain under mandatory quarantine as under All such persons who have been directed by healthcare personnel to remain under strict home institutional quarantine. Persons violating quarantine will be liable to legal action under Section 188 of the IPC 1860. Para 21. Instruction for enforcement of above lockdown measures. All the district magistrates shall strictly enforce the national COVID-19 directives as specified in Annexure 1. Penalties prescribed shall be levied and collected from all persons and entities violating these directives. All workplaces, offices, commercial establishments, industries, etc. shall put in place arrangements for implementation of SOP before starting their functioning. Para 22. Penal provisions for violations. Any person violating these lockdown measures will be liable to be proceeded against as per the provisions of the Section 51 to 60 of the Disaster Management Act 2005. Besides legal action under Section 188 of the IPC and other legal provisions as applicable, extracts of these penal provisions are at Annexure 3.